Very stirring stuff, and of course that is everything in a nutshell that Australian Geographic represents, but so much more besides that. And tonight is one of the things that we hold most dear, and that is the spirit of Aussie adventure. And that is what we're going to be celebrating here tonight. And what a turnout. Give yourselves an applause for just being here in such great numbers. This is a great testament to the pulling power of our two speakers tonight, Tom Robinson and Richard Barnes, and welcome to both of you here tonight and for giving up your time. My name is Chrissie Goldrick. I'm the chair of the Australian Geographic Society. I know quite a lot of you already. I probably don't know all of you, but this is a new role for me. And I took on this role in August of last year after being the editor-in-chief for 10 years, and I've worked on the magazine for 25 years. So we always say that adventure is in our DNA, but now Australian Geographic has entered my own DNA. It's a wonderful organisation to be part of, and thank you all for coming here and being part of it tonight. Tonight we gather in this wonderful historical theatre, this cinema that was built in the 1930s. And the complex that we're in is located on the traditional lands of the Camaragal people of the Ku-ring-gai Nation. And I acknowledge their deep connection to this country, and I pay my respects to Camaragal people past, present and emerging. So this is the Australian Geographic Awards Roadshow, and we launched this concept of taking our awards on the road in 2019. And if you remember 2019, it was the year before everything changed. So we did 3 events that year, taking our awardees around the country, but we didn't get much further after that. And the reason that we do the roadshow is that at the awards, anyone who's been to the Australian Geographic Awards, we only give you 4 minutes to speak, and we know that people want to hear more from our adventurers. So we sort of decided that we would take this roadshow on the road so that we would hear the full stories from our sponsored adventurers and also the ones that we give awards to. But also we wanted to do a more affordable event as well. So that's what we're trying to do with these roadshow events. And the fact that we are sold out for this event shows that you've all really come to the party. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for turning out and supporting Australian Geographic and our incredible adventurers in this way. The Hayden Orpheum, our choice of venue, is an inspired one because really this theatre is the hub of adventure in Sydney these days. Thanks to people, it's a wonderful place to be, beautiful theatre, and the staff are absolutely marvellous. But also this is where a lot of adventure happens, and that's due to people like Jemima Robinson, who is here tonight. Where are you, Jemima? Jemima of Radical Reels has a number of the big adventure film festivals here, and I was here for the Banff Film Festival only just in November, and she draws huge crowds in here. So it's a real adventure hub, and this is the right place for us to be tonight. And because of your support, it does allow us to hold these events with in-person events with these high achievers. But more than that, it gives us all in the adventure community a chance to catch up with each other as well, doesn't it? So I look forward to catching up with some of you afterwards. We've got a little bit of time, hopefully, at the end, and we can go to the bar and meet each other, and you'll be able to meet Richard and Tom in there. But tonight we are acknowledging and celebrating a whole raft of human qualities that both of tonight's guests exemplify in spades. As do all our annual awardees and all of the people that we give our funding to, our adventurers. The values would include things like courage and ingenuity, single-mindedness and endurance. Also the rare ability to be really comfortable on one's own for a long time. That's something we human beings are not very good at it. Strength of character, I know both of them, I can attest to that. Swimming ability. Strong biceps, ambition, technical wizardry, navigational know-how, a lost art, inventiveness, good humour, as you'll find out. And the last one I'm going to mention is humility. And this is a really underrated value in our society. But both of our adventurers tonight are very humble people. And it's for us to blow their trumpets for them because they don't really do it for themselves. And that's what we'll be doing here tonight with both of you. Our first speaker tonight, Tom Robinson. Well, when Tom first applied for funding to the Australian Geographic Society for a solo expedition rowing across the Pacific from South America back to Australia, we weren't at all sure about about being part of the group of people that were going to encourage him to do this. And I haven't even met his mum yet. It was the chances of surviving on such a perilous journey. I mean, this part of the ocean, that southern Pacific Ocean, is the most remote and the most dangerous stretch of water in the world. And now it's not about age, but he was 22 years old at the time. And I thought, it's a huge undertaking. How much experience can Tom have already had in this regard? But it's an older head on young shoulders. I feel like Tom's somehow been here before. His interest, his passion for rowing, for wooden boats. He'd already taken on his first adventure when he was 14 years old, when you paddled from Brisbane to the Gold Coast. But more than the I shouldn't say paddling. I'll get to that in a minute. The difference between paddling and rowing. Oops. Rowing to the Gold Coast. But Tom's interest is in the rowing, but it's also in the boats themselves. And when he left school, he went off to do a boat building apprenticeship. And in fact, he is quite the expert in building wooden boats. And so part of his campaign really with his big row across the Pacific is to demonstrate the sustainability of this old technology in boats. So he's a wonderful technician with his craft, as well as a very courageous adventurer, and someone who also, like Richard, is quite comfortable navigating across broad oceans by the stars and with what technology they have. What really appealed to me, though, in the end, and why we did give you the funding, was it became very clear in his application that he wasn't really looking to break a record, and he wasn't looking to be some kind of world beater, and it wasn't about fame. He said it was really about a personal journey of fulfillment, and I think that is one of the things that connects both of our speakers tonight. It wasn't really about the records. Neither of our adventurers pursued big budget sponsors. In fact, Richard had probably no sponsors at all, and none of these big claims. They both wanted to just promote a spirit of adventure and the idea of sustainability. But Tom did learn the art of navigation. He learned boat building by going to Papua New Guinea, as well as doing his training and his apprenticeship. And going back to that idea about the difference between rowing and paddling, I realized only tonight really that rowers and paddlers are two different kinds of people, and ne'er the twain often mix. And I didn't think about segregating you both tonight in the audience. So I'm just hoping that we don't get no one's brought their paddles or their oars with them, so we should be okay. But we'll find out all about the difference, I think, between rowing and paddling as we go through the night. So here to tell his own story in the way that only Tom Robinson can is Tom Robinson. Please welcome him to the stage.
Righty, thank you very much, Chrissie, for that wonderful introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be standing here before you tonight, supporting Australian Geographic and having them support me and being able to tell my story about my adventure across the Pacific. Now, we've got 40 minutes for me to tell a story that lasts 18 months, so I'm going to have to really work my way through it. So here I am here on the departure day of my trip across the Pacific. This was the 2nd of July 2022. At this point, I've been working full-time on the project for over a year. It took me 5 months to build the boat. It Took another 5 months just to get it into a container. That was during COVID. Things were very difficult. And then it took another 5 months for that container to get from Brisbane to Lima, Peru. It was a long and arduous journey just to get to that start line. So you can see here on this cloudy, windless day departing from Callao, the port of Callao in Peru, which is one of the busiest seaports on the west coast of South America. You can see that big smile on my face, and that smile is the result of a 10-year dream coming to reality. So I was 14 when I first had this idea of rowing across the Pacific. By that stage, I was living a real Huckleberry Finn-esque childhood on the Brisbane River. I was making rafts, I was sailing, I was rowing. I used to row to and from school every day. So I was just obsessed with rowing, and I read so many stories about Australian adventurers and what they had achieved. So one morning, I woke up and I looked in the mirror and I told myself, Tom, you're going to row across the Pacific Ocean and you're going to do it in a boat that you've designed and built. So here I am here with a big smile on my face. And people ask me, what was that feeling like? Oh, thank you. And so people ask me, what was the feeling like of setting out there on that first day of going out into the unknown? And it was a strange feeling, but beneath that smile there was a determination that I couldn't let go of. It was so strong. And I didn't really have time to be nervous or to think about what was going on around me. I was so focused on that first day and on those first sort of few hours when I was leaving the port, making sure I dodged the ships and looked out for pirates and all these sorts of things. Interestingly, on the radio for the first few days, over and over again, the Port Authority would send out a message just saying, keep an eye out for small unlit craft, which could be pirates or it could be me. So you can see here, this is a typical day in the Pacific. The first 30 days of my journey were just like this. There was no sun, it was cloudy all the time, and it was pretty breezy. And you know, for so long I dreamt about the Pacific and I dreamt about those beautiful sunsets you see. Well, it was nothing like that. For the first 30 days, it was just cold and wet, and it was all so strange to be out there on my own after dreaming about it for so long. But mostly I was just so pleased and happy with myself and happy to be out there alone at sea. With a big smile. So here's the cockpit of the boat. You can see there, it's all very simple. The rubbish went into that container, the water was in that container, compass there, fishing rod, oars, so you get the picture there. You can see my route here. This is about the first sort of 40 days. You can see from Lima there, I'm setting off, and I'm on this course, this sort of northwesterly course. I'm sort of aiming up towards Hawaii, and I was pretty nervous that I wasn't going to catch this Humboldt current, and I wasn't going to get on the right track to cross the Pacific. You can see here I was only about 200 miles south of the Galapagos, but it was day 31 when the clouds parted for the first time and the sun came out, and I just saw the most beautiful sunset of my life. It was just spectacular. And I thought, okay, this is the day that things are going to change for the better. And that was the day that the current changed and I started to make more westward progress as opposed to northwestward. And so that for me was the first big milestone and a really important step. So people asked me, did you see any ships out there, Tom? And before I left, I wasn't going to be sure. Some people said, oh, don't worry, you won't see any ships out there. It's a big ocean. Well, they were very wrong. There was ships everywhere. There were so many fishing boats. At night, the squid fishing fleet would just illuminate the horizon. There were literally hundreds of boats around me. And some got close, some stayed away, but this boat here came the closest, and this is an Ecuadorian tuna fishing boat. And the story goes that one morning I was sitting on the bucket doing my morning business, as you can imagine, and I see this boat in the distance and I'm quite intrigued, and they get closer and closer and closer, and I finish my business assuming they can't see me. But then as the boat gets closer, I realise that it's a tuna boat, and atop this tower is a man with big binoculars, and he spends all day scanning the horizon looking for tuna. So unbeknown to me, he'd been viewing my bodily functions for the morning. Anyway, this ship got closer and closer and closer, and at this time it was a mix of excitement and nerves. And so the next thing they did was they drop a dinghy. And as soon as they dropped that dinghy, I started to get very nervous and very excited, because it could either go two ways. Either they could be very friendly and help me out, or they could be pirates and rob me of everything I had. And that was quite scary. And so they dropped this boat, and I see this small boat coming towards me. And there's these two figures on board, and they've got hoodies on. I thought, this is very strange. And they come closer and closer and closer. Closer and closer. And I didn't know what they were about. I didn't know what was going on. And none of us said anything, and none of us smiled. And then one of these two men cracked a smile, and then I cracked a smile, and we both erupted and cheers and thumbs up, which was sort of this communication that I was all right and they were all right, and we were just going to be friends. At that stage, this was day 49 at sea. This was the first human interaction in 49 days. I hadn't even picked up my satellite phone to make a phone call. So this was the first time, and it was like this alien spaceship coming out of nowhere and just coming down upon me. It was so, so strange. And they only spoke Spanish, and I only spoke English, so we didn't get very far. But I was under the assumption that they wanted to help me. And I didn't need any help, but I decided that I'd do this one. So I did that to signify that I was hungry, and they got the message. And so then they went back to the big ship. And when they were back on this big ship, I saw men from the bridge up the top there. They'd come out of the bridge with these bags of shopping. They'd walk along the side decks and then throw these bags into the dinghy. And I started to lick my lips. I was getting very excited. I'm going to get some good food here. I was racking my brain thinking, what do I need? Was there anything on this boat I need? I couldn't really think of anything. But then I looked into the cabin and I only saw one roll of toilet paper left. And I was thinking, how can you say toilet paper in Spanish? And we were quite a distance apart. And so all I could do was this grand mime where I sort of bent over and did this one. And they all erupted. They all understood the assignment straight away. And they appreciated what I was after. And they all did this. And then the next thing I saw, two guys came out of that bridge deck with big industrial rolls of toilet paper under their arm. They do this one, and then they throw them into the boat. And so I was a very happy man. And so then the two men, they come back over and they start unloading all these goodies. And they also gave me some water and they gave me 2 big tuna. I tried to explain I had no refrigeration, so 2 was too many. But they gave me 2 big tuna, which were delightful. I had to throw one overboard. And then as soon as they arrived, they left again. They went back to the boat turned around, 3 big toots on the horn, and away they went. And within minutes, they were sort of in the distance and then over the horizon, and I was left alone once again. But this time I had all these goodies around me, so I was digging through, trying to see what they'd given me. And instead of there being staples and important things like that, there was lollies, and there was biscuits, and there was jam, and there was Powerade, and there was cigarettes. So not at all what I needed. Very strange. But amongst it all, there was this strange-looking sort of ham sausage meat, and there was some bread rolls. So on day 49 at night time, and I had my little gas cooker, I made hamburgers in the middle of the Pacific. I was 2,000 miles from the nearest shop, and I made hamburgers. It was just fantastic. There's a typical evening on the Pacific. Aha, fish. So everyone asked me, were there any fish out there, Tom? What's the life like out there? And I must say, in that eastern part of the Pacific, there is so much diversity, so much biodiversity in that ocean. It is just spectacular. Every single day was like a front row seat to a David Attenborough documentary. There was life everywhere. There was mahi-mahi, there was flying fish, whales, dolphins, sharks, manta rays, everything you can imagine. It was just spectacular. And so the mahi-mahi became really good eating and a big part of my diet. So this is the before, and this is the after. So there's inside the cabin, just cooking up some food. So that's what it was like under the boat most days. Just spectacular. There's a shark in the distance. The sharks were interesting. People, how often did you see sharks? And not that often. I saw a shark maybe once every 2 weeks. But they were relatively inquisitive creatures, and so they'd like to use Maiwa, my boat, as a back scratcher. And so they'd sort of come along the side and then roll on their belly and run along the side of the boat like this and then go around and around in circles. They did that quite a few times. And I got quite used to having these sharks here. And so after a while, just for a bit of fun, I'd grab them by the tail and hold on until they thrashed about. And just before they came around to bite me, I'd let go and they'd swim away and then come back again. So the sharks were good fun. We were good friends. The blisters. What were the blisters like? This was the the calluses. I didn't really get blisters. The calluses formed right in the beginning of the journey, and they would last for the entirety of a leg. So that was what my hands looked like. And just before I got to land, I used a pair of scissors and cut them off. Okay, so this is sort of the next stage of leg 1. And so on leg 1, I had this rough idea that I was trying to get to Uahuka here in the Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia. For the first 75 days, things were going swimmingly. They were so good. I was on track, making good progress. I was expecting to reach land after about 100 days at sea. I had plenty of food and water. Things were going well. Day 75 is about here. You can still see I had a long way to come down to this island group, but before I left, I was on the phone to one other guy who's done the same trip as me, solo, and he said, "Don't worry, Tom, you can't miss those Marquesas. You won't miss them." So I had that confidence in my heart for most of this trip. And then day 75 came, and after it had been pretty calm for most of this journey, this strong southeasterly came up, and it just blew and blew and blew. And so every morning I'd get out my handheld GPS that told me my latitude and longitude. I'd go to my paper chart and I'd put a little cross, and very consistently those crosses would go across like this. And then after day 75, instead of doing this, they started doing this, up and up and up and up and up, going the wrong way. So it was this frightening experience where I was going the wrong way. And almost overnight, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to reach the Marquesas. Almost overnight, the whole journey changed. And when you're doing a trip like this, it's so important to know what's next, to have an image in your mind of where the next step is. And when that image is just taken away from you, it's really, really hard, mentally and physically too. And so then the only thing I could do was pull out a chart and say, okay, well, where's next? And for me, it was imperative to get to an island before cyclone season began. I needed somewhere where I could stay for 4 months during the cyclone season. So I pulled out these charts and I was looking. There's almost no islands around there. But if you go another 1,000 miles to the west, there's a little tiny island called Penryn. And so I found this island on the map, Penryn. I went to my pilot books and I went to P in the index, and then I found there was only one paragraph about Penryn, and the first word was inhabited. The next sentence was 2 villages, and that was all I needed. That was the moment I knew that I was going to go to Penryn, because it was inhabited. I could stay there, there'd be food and water. And so on day 75, the first time I called my dad, I said, "Hey Dad, how's it going?" He said, "Yeah, not too bad. How are you, Tom?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going well. I'm going well." He's a casual guy. And then I said, "Look, I don't think I'm going to make these Marquesas." And he was very shocked by this, obviously. It was 2 in the morning where he was. And I said, no, I'm not going to make it, but there's a little island here. I think it's called Penryn, so I'm going to try and get there. He went, "Okay, then, good luck." And so just like that, my first leg turned from a 4,000-mile leg to a 5,000-mile leg. It just blew everything out of proportion. This was a very, very hard time mentally, because not only did I not know if I was going to get back on track to this island, but I didn't know if I was going to have enough food or water. It was really, really stressful and hard. So the water's an interesting topic. I'm just going to brush on this quickly. I carried most of the water I needed, so I had about 250 litres. And then for the first 130 days, roughly, I drank 2 a day, 2 litres a day, and that was plenty enough. I felt really good on that amount, despite rowing for 8 to 10 hours every day. But then after about day 130, I couldn't hack it anymore on 2 litres, so I upped it to 3 with this manual water maker that turns salt into fresh. So I'd sit there and I'd pump for about half an hour, and that would give me the extra ration I needed to keep going. And so after 130 days of what was immense hardship, and much more hardship than I ever expected, from that came this immense inner joy that is very hard to articulate, but I've read about it in spiritual books, and it was just this feeling that everything was going to be all right, and after so much hardship, I just couldn't have been happier with my place in the world and the choices I'd made in life and the reason I was out there. I was just so content, and for about a week there, it was this warm inner glow, and I don't know if I'll ever get to experience anything quite like that. It was just magical. And so here's Penryn. And so this was the little atoll I was aiming for. The only information I had, obviously, was that it was inhabited, and I had a small sketch in a pilot book. That was all I had. And so I called up my dad and I said, "It looks pretty dangerous trying to get through these passes here into the lagoon. Is there any way you can help me out?" And he said, "I'll see what I can do." I said, "See if you can get the locals to tow me in a boat, because these passes are very dangerous for an underpowered craft, like a rowing boat." So he said, yeah, I'll see what I can do. And so he organised this, thankfully. It was amazing. So all I knew was that I just had to get close to this passage here, and the locals would come out and tow me in. And I got closer and closer and closer. And then on day 160, 5 months at sea, this little grey-green speck appeared on the horizon. And I got closer and closer, and I saw the coconut palms. And this was my first taste of land in 5 months, the first time I could feast my eyes on something other than water. And I waited there, and I just prayed and hoped that a boat would come out and pull me in. And it was getting into the afternoon, and I couldn't contact them, and they couldn't contact me, so we had no idea where we were. But eventually, I was scanning the horizon, and just in the distance, I saw this big black bow of this aluminium barge coming towards me, and I just cried out salvation. I was so happy. And so I threw them this tow line. I bought this tow line in Brisbane just before I left, just in case. And I threw them this tow line. There was this boat full of big, jolly, brown, smiling people. They were a happy bunch, and they were happy to see me. And as you can imagine, I was happy to see them. And so I towed them this line, and we made our way through the lagoon. And here's the picture here. That's about halfway across the lagoon, heading towards Omaka village. And just keep in mind, this island here of Penryn, there's only 200 people that live there. There's almost nothing there. So here we are here. So eventually we got to the wharf here, and I've got a customs man there, so he stamped my passport. They've got everything there. And then he said, okay, Tom, you can step ashore now. And I'm standing here, and the wharf's here, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is my first step in 5 months. How am I going to make it? And I was very, very trepidatious about this first step, and it was a bit of a leap to get on the shore. But eventually I worked up the courage and I made this leap, and I felt my bare feet touch the solid ground for the first time in so long. And what a feeling that was. And I tried to stand up straight, but I couldn't. I was just stumbling around like a drunken. It took 3 days before I could walk in a straight line. But thankfully all these men here, they came around me and they held me up and we posed for a photograph. And that for me was just the most amazing milestone of the journey. And there's a man here, Malou, and he came up to me and he shook my hand and he said, Tom, welcome to Penryn. It's a pleasure to have you here on our island, but there's something I must inform you of. And I said, okay, what's that? He said, well, Tom, your name is no longer Tom Robinson. You are now Mahuta Hoi Hoi Asanga, which in our language means the warrior that has paddled from afar. So welcome to Penryn, Tom. And so from that moment on, I knew that I was at a special place. And Penryn, part of the Cook Islands, it really is a very special place. The people were just fantastic, and they really welcomed me into their community. And from that first day, I made a pact with myself that I would involve myself as much as I can with island life and do everything the locals did. And so there was fishing to be done. We had to build a new house for the minister. There was all sorts of jobs to be done. And so I really became a part of the life and a village man. So I'm just going to run through some pictures of life on Penryn. Here's a typical house. Here's church, Zionna. So they are devout Christians, and it's just such an amazing part of their lives. They go to church 5 times a week, and if you're under 40, you go to Sunday school 4 times on Sunday. And so it's full on, but they really do, because it's a small island, it's a simple life. They don't have the pleasures that we have, and so instead of devoting themselves to consumerism and excess, they devote themselves to God and to singing and to living a harmonious life. And what a pleasure that is to be a part of these people. So it's a typical feast here. There was always feasting on the island. Dancing, they loved to dance. The dancing was exceptional. While I was there was dance practice, singing practice, drumming practice 5 nights a week. So it was full on. You never got a break. I was coming home from Sunday school. And here I am there. So after 4 months, it became time to leave. That was when the cyclone season was over and the supply ship had come to bring me extra food. They only get a supply ship every 3 months. And there's no shop on the island or anything like that. And so little did I know there was all these going away ceremonies organised for me before I left. And so there was about 4 in total, and they're quite a lengthy process, and you've got to sit down in this chair here, and all the village stands before you like you guys are here, and they all sing, and they sing, and they sing, and they sing, and then they give you gifts. So they pile you up with all these beautiful necklaces. This is called a sei pukuhatu. It's a sei because it's a necklace, and it's a pukuhatu because it's on your heart. And so they give you all these beautiful handmade gifts, and then you have to eat. So you sit there at that table that's set for the whole village. You sit there on your own, and you eat, and you eat, and you eat, until you're completely full, and then you eat some more. And the singing continues, there's speeches, everybody's crying, it's very emotional. And then after all that's done, then the village comes together and eats all the cold food that's left on the table. It's just exceptional. And so it was just so touching for me to become a part of that island. And I guess at the time I didn't realise the impact I had on them or the impact that they had on me, but it was truly exceptional. And so here's my departure day morning, and how sad it was to leave that island. There was many, many tears, and there was yet again another ceremony. All the island made breakfast. It was all happening. They towed me out of the lagoon, and they said goodbye.
Have a safe trip. God bless. Take care.
you go. That was my departure from Penryn. That was the hardest departure of the entire journey. And then I set off again on the second leg of my trip across the Pacific. And when you're in a rowing boat, you really are at the whimsy of the breeze and the current. And so when I left Penryn, I really didn't know where I was going to end up. I was hoping to get down to Fiji, but I was heading out once again into the unknown, like a true adventure. And so for the next 38 days, I rowed and I rowed and I rowed. And there's nothing particularly interesting about this journey. It was very monotonous. I didn't see many ships at all, didn't catch many fish, but still it was, once again, that immense pleasure of being alone at sea and having no contact with the outside world. That, for me, was the great pleasure. Thanks, Australian Geographic. So you can see here, this is my course here. From Penryn there, I made my way south, along here and along here and along here, until I got to American Samoa. I didn't plan on stopping in American Samoa, but unfortunately I got this terrible staph infection on my legs. I had all these awful pussy sores appear on my legs. It was very painful, very ugly too. But luckily I had antibiotics on board, which I took, which fixed me up, but I still wasn't 100%, so I made the decision to stop in at American Samoa there and just recuperate and get better. So here I am there, approaching Whangaitua Bay in Tutuila Island, American Samoa. And it's just so good on this journey where you don't go non-stop, you stop along the way. You just get this amazing high and low of the arrivals and the departures and the arrivals and the departures. It really is such a roller coaster. But then you get a smile like that on your face when you get to a new island, and just an immense feeling. So here I am here in Pango Pango Harbour in American Samoa. I ended up staying in American Samoa for 5 weeks. I just decided I'd stay there until I felt better, until I felt like rowing again. Because at this stage here, I was ready just to pack up and catch the next plane home. At that stage, I was really low, really low. But thankfully, I got better and better and better. And after 5 weeks, I decided to head off. I'll just run through some pictures of American Samoa. It's a beautiful place, very stunning. It's just a fishing port, really. There's no tourism there. There's only one hotel that has a hot shower. And there's these awesome buses you can catch. They're $1 each, and they take you around the island. They're fantastic. And then here we go. I was setting off again on the third leg of my journey. And I didn't realize at the time then, but that was going to be the hardest and the most painful journey of my life. The next 52 days. It was just pure pain and suffering. There we go. There I am there. I must say, I did wear a hat most of the time. I just took it off for the odd photo. I wore sunnies too. But the next 52 days were just torture. I was hoping to get further south, but unfortunately, I found myself in the South Pacific Convergence Zone, which is a real nasty part of the Pacific where the weather converges and mixes and changes. And so it was very unpredictable, often rough, very cloudy, just really unpleasant. And so for those 52 days, it was just low all the time, and very strong breezes. At some points, it was up to 50 knots. It was really awful. And I was constantly wet, just the waves breaking over the boat, salt rubbing in all my pores and everywhere. It was, I hate to say it, but there was nothing fun about that leg at all. And then I found myself approaching Vanuatu archipelago here. You can see my course here. I was coming down, expecting to maybe go through the islands here and then into Luganville, the capital. And then just one day before I was approaching, the breeze changes and I've got to go up this way. I find myself approaching Gower Island here. Once again, a small island. I didn't really know what was happening there, didn't really know what was going to be there, but I was just aiming for this island. And so I was rowing until I got to the northern part of this island here. And I was just trying to find a safe anchorage. I wanted somewhere where I could stay for the night and where I could anchor and then wait for the weather to pass and then continue on. And I was rowing past this beautiful high volcanic mountain. There was a sandy beach fringing, a small lagoon, shallow lagoon, and then a coral reef. And I was rowing outside this coral reef, and I was rowing like this, and the reef was just there, rowing like this. And I was desperately trying to find a place where I could enter the reef, into the lagoon, and anchor for the night. But there was just nothing there. There was nothing there at all. I continued to row and row, and at that point I'd seen no sign of human life whatsoever. I kept on rowing, and then I saw a canoe on the beach, and I saw a small thatch hut, and I saw a little boy and an old man, and that really got me interested because they saw me and I saw them. So the first thing I did was put a pair of pants on, and then I stood up. I stood up to see what was going on, and as soon as I stood up, I realised that I just rowed past a small little entrance through the reef and into the lagoon, and I could see this boy and this old man launching the canoe. And then I decided, okay then, there's this pass here. I've got to make it through that pass. That's my only hope of finding an anchorage before dark. Because once it got to dark, there'd be no choice but to leave the island and get offshore to safety. So I turned the boat around and I rowed into the breeze. And I was rowing with all my might. I was rowing as hard as I've ever rowed to try and make it back to that entrance. I made it to the front of this entrance here. And I could see the old man and the boy in the canoe at the other end of the entrance in the lagoon. The old man there was giving me these hand signals, trying to get me to come in through the pass. Now, when you're paddling, you're facing the right way, so you can see where you're going. But when you're rowing, you're doing this all the time. It's much harder when you're trying to get through a coral atoll and into a lagoon. And so I had this tiny little pass, and there was coral on either side, just outside the oar span. It was a really tight entrance, and I looked down, and the bottom wasn't sandy and smooth. It was coral and rocky and jagged, and I had my heart in my mouth, and I pulled and I pulled and I pulled. I was doing this, looking around, trying to steer, and then just like that, I made it through the pass and into this lagoon, and that was the hairiest landfall of the trip. I made it in and I threw the anchor down. I just had this immense feeling of satisfaction that I'd made it safely to this isolated place. The old man then paddled up, and this is Victor, and he was my good friend on Vanuatu. He paddled up, and he said, "Oh, hello, welcome to Vanuatu." I said, "Hello, my name's Tom. I've just come from Samoa. Before then I was, in Cook Islands and Peru, rowing across the Pacific." And he kind of understood, kind of didn't. He thought I was a bit mad. And then in the background here on the rocks, I saw his wife, and she was walking along the rocks. She had a coconut in one hand and a bush knife in the other, and she was husking this coconut. And then Victor says, "Just a moment, Tom." And he paddles ashore, and he gets this coconut, and he comes back out, and he says, "Welcome to Vanuatu, Tom. My wife had tears in her eyes for you." It was very emotional. But Victor turned out to be a wonderful host, and unfortunately here, I couldn't step ashore because this part of town wasn't an official port of entry, and I made that mistake in Samoa and paid the price, and so I wasn't game to step ashore, and so it would be another 20 days before I got to the capital of Espiritu Santo Island, Luganville, and was able to officially step ashore. So I had this amazing adventure coming through the Vanuatuan archipelago. Stunning scenery, lovely, lovely people, and of course kava. They're really big on kava in Vanuatu. And so I'd stop at a village, and an old man would paddle out, and he'd say, "Hey bro, you drink kava?" I'd say, "Oh, I don't know, what's it like?" He said, "Okay, we have small kava drinking ceremony tonight." And so he'd come back out with his mate, and they'd smoke their tobacco, and they'd sit on Maiwa's aft deck. They'd be perched there, and they'd hand me this ceremonial cup, and then they'd pour me the kava, and we'd just have the most pleasant evenings imaginable in these lovely anchorages, talking about stories of the sea and life in Vanuatu and life in Australia. Eventually I made it all the way to Luganville, and this is here I am here with a church group, beautiful people there, and so nice. And I stayed in Luganville, Vanuatu for 3 weeks, and that was really just enough time to resupply and get to know the place and feel like I'd experienced Vanuatu. And then from then on, I was really keen to get going and get back to Australia on the last leg. So I set off here. Here I am setting off Vanuatu on the last leg. And then, as many of you know, things went sour. And so there I am there. And what a feeling that was. So the story there is that I'd been rowing all day. It was my 3rd day out from Vanuatu. Been rowing all day very comfortably. It wasn't particularly rough. I'd stayed dry all day. And I retired from the oars a bit early, and I was sitting in the cabin, and the hatch was open. And the thing with an ocean rowing boat is that when you have the hatch closed, the boat self-rights. So when it was rough, I'd always close the hatch so the boat would self-right. But obviously for about 99% of the trip, that hatch was open, just because it was calm enough that you could do that. So that day, I'd stayed dry all day. I felt very comfortable with that hatch open. I'm sitting in the cabin there, looking out through the open hatch. The next thing I hear this huge crashing sound, and this giant wave just engulfs the boat, and the boat just turns upside down instantly, just like that. It was so quick, absolutely terrifying. I found myself trapped inside the cabin, holding my breath and just not knowing what was going on. I came to my senses, swam through the open hatch and then out underneath the cockpit, and then held onto the upturned hull. And I sat there, and my mind was racing, the adrenaline was pumping. I could not believe what had just happened. It was truly frightening. And so I sat there and I sort of assessed my options, and at this point it was getting dark. So I tried to right the boat unsuccessfully, and then I sat there and realised, well, there was no hope in trying to right the boat during the night. It would be too dangerous. By that time, the sea state had increased, so I decided I'd sit on this upturned hull until the morning, and then I'd try and right the boat again by flooding certain sections of the hull, etc. And then I realised that my EPIRB would be going off because the holster had broken, and therefore it would go off automatically when wet. So I realised my EPIRB was going off, but it was facing the wrong way. So I had to swim back underneath the boat, pull out the EPIRB and climb onto the upturned hull. I then tied a line across the boat and wrapped it around my waist once. And there I sat, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how long I was going to be there, if I was going to get rescued, if I was going to right the boat and continue. There were just so many unknowns. But I knew then that that night was going to be the longest and coldest night of my life, and that my only way to get through it would be to set small goals. And so I knew that the sun was going to set. The sun set. The next goal, I knew the moon was going to come up that night. And so that was my next goal. Then I knew the sun had come up. That's the next goal. Then I could get some water, some food, then try and right the boat, etc., etc. You just really have to set these small goals to get through the big challenge or the small challenge. So I sat there for the night, completely cold, and just my mind was racing the whole time, and it was really, really a really strange scenario. And then eventually, after the whole night had passed, I saw this faint purple in the east, and I knew that I'd just survived the night. And for me, that was a really big deal. I knew that things were probably going to be all right then. And not long after that, I heard a plane fly overhead, and the feeling of hearing that plane was just indescribable. It was just absolutely just awesome feeling. And so I sat there, and this plane was flying over and over and over, and I thought, well, perhaps there's a ship in the distance, and they'll be coming towards me. And so not long after that plane flew overhead, it was still circling, I saw this big black spot on the horizon, and it was a ship. And that was the first moment that I really realized that the journey was over, and that was it. And it was a really strange feeling. And the ship got closer and closer and closer. And then I realized it was a cruise ship. And that was the first time during the night that I'd really become aware of my nudity. And I thought, really, this can't be happening. Surely this is a dream. A cruise ship of all ships. So there's Tiny Tom there. There's the cruise ship. And this cruise ship got closer and closer and closer, and I saw the literally thousands of people lining the port decks, binoculars, big zoom lenses on their cameras. It was terrible. Anyway, I couldn't have been happier to see the ship. And they got closer and closer, and then they threw a rope ladder down, and there was this hole in the side of the ship. And I got closer and closer until Maiwa was bouncing along the side of this ship. And it was a bit rough then, and it was full on. It was full on. And then I got to the ladder, and I made this leap from Maiwa to the ladder, and I clung on. And it was only then I realised just how weak I had become from the 14 hours of holding on for dear life. But I managed to climb up this ladder, and I got about halfway up the hole in the side of the ship till I was about here. And I looked down this corridor, and there was dozens of crew all looking at me. And I went, I'm in the nude. And then these men came with towels, and they wrapped towels around me. And then I stood up, and I went, whoa, this is all very strange. And they pulled out a wheelchair. I said, no, I've got legs. It's okay. They said, sit down, mate. You don't get a choice now. And so they wheeled me off to the sick bay, and they put me in a bed, and they asked me a few questions. The captain came down, and I thought he was going to give me a big dressing down, but he was a lovely man. He was very, very nice about the whole thing. And then they said, what would you like for breakfast? I said, oh, what do you got? And they said, we got a buffet, Tom, what do you want? I said, oh, bacon and eggs, please. And how about a pair of pants? They said, yeah, we can do that. And so they came, and I got a pair of pants, and I got bacon and eggs. And then they said, and do you want to call your parents? I said, I'd love to call my parents. And so he gave me a phone, and I called my parents. And the first thing I said was, did you get any more sleep than I did last night? Because they would have known, because the EPIRB went off, they would have been told by EMSA that Tom was in trouble. So they said, yeah, we got a couple of hours, actually. I went, well, that's pretty good. You've hardened up, you've done well. Anyway, so it was just so emotional to speak to them and just to let them know I was okay, I was being looked after. So here's the crew. The crew were exceptional. They were so kind to me. I felt very bad, I still do, about having to divert this cruise ship. But in the end, everyone seemed very happy about it, and they were. This young guy here, he's about my age. He was ecstatic that he got to do a rescue. That was the best thing ever. And then so the cruise went to Auckland, and then I flew back to Brisbane. And I got to the airport, and I was thinking, maybe someone will be here to pick me up. Maybe I'll catch the train home. And then here's me with mum and dad. So this is Tim and Veronica, mum and dad. They're also Shore team, and they have done so much for me, not just in this journey, but since I was a kid, obviously. And since I had this dream, they were always there, and they were there to support me. And so it was just an emotional reunion to be back there with them. And so here we go. We can see the entire journey from Peru to Vanuatu, about 90% of the way across the Pacific there. What an adventure that was. And it was a realization of a childhood dream. Thank you very much. I've just got one more thing to tell you, if that's all right. And so that was October last year, and that for most was the end of the journey, and that was it. But there's been two little developments since then that I'd like to tell you about. The first thing is a letter I got from Guinness a couple of weeks ago, and that was the certificate. And so there's a bit of a debate as to where the Pacific stops and where the Coral Sea starts and where the Pacific ends and where the Tasman Sea starts. But I got this letter in the mail that said, Tom Robinson, youngest person to row the Pacific, and so 14-year-old Tom would be pretty chuffed about that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the fate of Maiwa. So everyone asks, what happened to Maiwa? Was she pulled aboard the cruise ship? Did she sink? What happened? And she wasn't pulled aboard the cruise ship. They can't really do that. And she didn't sink. She's made of plywood and there's foam flotation on board. So I always knew that she'd still be out there floating. And I was very certain I'd see her again. And I thought perhaps she might end up in far north Queensland here. She left from Vanuatu, which is down here. And then it was 10 minutes to midnight on New Year's Eve, just passed. And I got a message on Facebook. And it was this person saying, I have information on your boat, Maiwa. And I just couldn't believe it. I was in utter shock. I said, tell me more, tell me more. And the next day she messaged me again. She said, hi, my name is Cindy Morawa. I am from Ferguson Island in Milne Bay region of Papua New Guinea. And my family live on Panawina Island, an even more remote island. And they have found your boat. And I just couldn't believe it. I said, really? I said, okay, I'm going to come up there. He said, all right, is it in good condition? They said, yeah, it's in pretty good condition. You can come and grab it if you want. Okay. This is good. Little did I know. Anyway, and so I just got back 3 days ago, actually, so it's all very fresh. But it was 2 flights, one from Brisbane to Moresby to Alatau, and I had to jump on a local trading boat and head out to Panawina Island here, right in the middle of nowhere. And then this is Maiwa. And people say, is it sad, is it heartbreaking to see her wrecked like this? And for a moment there, I felt like a broken man. It was very sad. But very quickly, I turned around and realised that this is the final resting place for Maiwa. She did a fantastic job across the Pacific. I put so much love and heart and soul into her, and she looked after me, and so I really couldn't be happier with the outcome of the journey and where she ended up. And so I spent a week and a half in this village here with these people, talking about Maiwa, how they found her, pulled her off the reef. And so this really is the full stop, the final part of Tom's Pacific journey, the 10-year dream coming to an end. I was run through some pictures. The children were frightened of me. They had never seen a white man before. So they'd been 10 years since there was an outsider in their village. And so here they are, they're the people of Panawina and the beautiful canoes. And there we go, that sums up my trip. So thank you all very much. Thank you very much. And now if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer a question or two. We'll just wait for the mic to come.
Firstly, congratulations on such an incredible effort. There was one thing I was curious about. You said when you got to American Samoa and you stepped ashore, you later paid a price for doing that.
Yes.
What was that price?
So the rule, if you're a rowing boat, if you're a kayak, if you're a cruise ship or a yacht, is you have to go to the official port of entry, and you've got to anchor and tell them that you're there. They then board your boat, and then once you've officially entered, then you can step ashore. When I was going to American Samoa, I was absolutely wrecked physically, and I wasn't going to make it to Pangapunga Harbour before dark. So I decided to go into Whanga, into a bay. And when I got to that bay, I was just a complete mess. I felt like I was I was on death's doorstep. And so the boat grounded on the beach, and I stepped ashore, and some people helped me, and they gave me some food and water. They could see I was in a real state. But the unfortunate thing was I just happened to land outside the house of the customs official. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. So he came out, and he was really not happy that I had disrespected him. I hadn't even told the chief I was coming. And so he was really not happy. And so he kicked me out of the village and said, get out of here and keep rowing. So it was another 5 hours to row like 3 miles to Pangapunga Harbour. That really, really hurt me, but I got there and they were all right in the end. He told me I was going to go to jail and all the rest of it, but no, he was all right in the end. So yeah, that's the story there.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? The man there, yeah.
I've mainly done kayaking. Just interested in what sort of conditions, some of the more difficult days you had to row through.
As in sea state and breeze. So if it was anything over about 20 to 25 knots, rowing became relatively impractical. It's different with paddling, but in a rowing boat you've got 2 oars and they're fixed at the rowlocks there. And so after sort of 25 knots it becomes impractical. I guess I rowed up until those conditions, and then I'd just hide in the cabin. It wasn't any more than that. And as I think I mentioned before, sometimes it was blowing 40, 50 knots, and so there was a wide variety of conditions. Yeah. Swell, big swell. I couldn't ever measure it accurately, but there was big mountainous waves there. Yeah. Any more questions? We have a woman here. We'll just wait for the... What did I do at night? It's a good question. I slept all night. One of the beauties of rowing as opposed to sailing is that you get to sleep all night. So I had these most beautiful sleeps, and I'd finish rowing, and I'd cook, and I'd eat, and I'd even occasionally have time to read a book, and then I'd fall asleep, and I'd sleep until the morning.
So would you stay in that spot at an anchor?
Sorry, I see what you mean. No, the boat would just drift. And so most of the time the drifting was good, but occasionally I'd go backwards. So you can see on my track there's a few times where I did a big loop, I went backwards and went back again. But most of the time the drift was all right. One more question at the back there.
How do you feel about being on your own?
How do I feel? I felt fantastic. Before I left, so many people asked me, how do you know you're going to be all right out there on your own for so long? And the only thing I could say is just that I know it's going to be really wonderful, and I don't know why some people are different in that way. Some people can handle it, some people can't. But right from that very young age, I knew that I was going to be able to handle it, and not only that, I was going to really enjoy it. And so I did. I really, really enjoyed it. And I disdained the idea of having to talk to people on the phone. I didn't give anyone my number except for my parents. And I had no music. I didn't take an iPod or anything like that. I didn't want any distractions from the spiritual journey of rowing the Pacific.
All right. Yeah, please thank Tom. Our next guest, Richard Barnes. On the 18th of February last year, almost a year ago, Richard quietly paddled his kayak into Riveting Harbour on the South Island of New Zealand, which sounds like something out of The Lord of the Rings, doesn't it, Riveting? And there to meet him was a small huddle of his friends and a bunch of school kids, and once again, the customs and excise people who seem to not be so busy that they can't be following around after these small boats landing on their shores. Richard had departed Hobart 67 days earlier, and at the age of 62, Richard has achieved one of the holy grails of world kayaking, which in a perfect example of Aussie understatement is known as crossing the ditch. It's been done before, of course, except he's the only person to do it solo, non-stop, and without a supporting vessel or any kind of external aid. Please welcome Richard to the stage. Now, I've just got to find my notes, which I've left over there. I'll just grab them. Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. So, Richard, let's see what comes up here next.
Get to sit down.
Here we go. Yes. So, welcome and congratulations on your incredible achievement, but also being our Australian Geographic Adventure of the Year for 2023.
Thanks, Chrissie.
Can we have a look at your medallion? Show us the medallion. Hello, we'll just hold up the box. There you go. It is very
There you are,
good,
everyone. I feel like the castle. I need my trophy room for it.
So here are a few of the stats and facts about what Richard actually achieved on that voyage across the Tasman. 67 days alone at sea.
Which compared to Tom sounds very minimal. And I'm not sure that I started out being so confident I'd like to be alone. I'd never tried it being alone, so I had no idea, and I thought it would be a much bigger deal. But like Tom said, it is rather fun being alone. You don't have to do whatever anyone else says. It's only yourself.
Yes, and so tell us a little bit about where the idea came from. When did you first decide that this holy grail of kayaking was something that Richard Barnes would be able to pull off?
So I've got some friends in the audience who are part of 2nd Gordon Scouts, And as part of that scout group, we used to take venturers away for end-of-year activities. And we had a night, New Year's Eve, about 9 years ago, and we were telling each other what our resolutions for the year would be. The other venturers were saying, I'm going to be girlfriend for that person, that sort of thing. Important things in life. And I just slipped in that I was going to paddle to New Zealand about 9 years ago. The venturers didn't notice, but I think the leaders possibly recognised it as a bit bigger deal.
Well, look, here's a few images of the kinds of view that you had. So that's interesting, isn't it? The kayakers are facing in the direction of travel and the rowers have got their backs to it. So this is what you faced at different times on your journey, and there is quite a difference between those three pictures. So tell us, which of those did you experience more than the other?
Well, the one that's got the tin of spaghetti in front of it. That's really what I saw most of the time. That was a lunchtime scene, my little tin of something or other, spaghetti or fish in front of me. But I guess it's more what the waves were like, and Tom talked about big waves, big swells and things. But it's not like that most of the time. Maybe 70%, 80% of the time, it's pretty moderate. It's a little bit wavy, it's a little bit windy, but it's generally pretty benign and pretty nice out on the ocean. There are those times, like in the left-hand photo, when it gets a bit sportier. And there are also those times when it gets this magically calm, beautiful, peaceful, and that's really the bonus of being out there. To experience that incredible calm is just so amazing.
I think that, should we ask him what he means by sporty? I think we know, don't we? Yet again, like Tom, masters of understatement.
It is interesting when it gets rougher. I was lucky, I think. I didn't get it super rough, never. And so is that just complete luck? Or maybe I would like to have had it just a little bit rougher so I could seen what my boat Blue Moon was like when it got a bit rougher. I still don't know the answer to that. I never will.
So, Richard, this didn't come out of nowhere. Tell us a little bit about your kayaking background or your rowing or whatever you've done in boats. How far back does it go? What have you done?
I've got some high school friends here and they know that I was never a rower at school. One of my big regrets. I started in canoeing through Scouts and then through university. So I've been doing it since I was Tom's age. It's a long time, 50 years roughly of canoeing. There's so many different aspects to it. The picture up there is when I did my first ever Hawkesbury Canoe Classic. First time I tried to do a long distance event, and it was in what was more a standard boat of the time back in 1981, and I was just so hooked on the excitement of trying to paddle. This is a race that goes overnight, 100 plus kilometres, and it just fired up my imagination, excitement to give it a go, to see what it was like, get through the night, extending the possible.
And I think you just completed it again, haven't you? Very recently.
The 40th time.
Yeah, 40th time. And in fact, Richard has...
I have tried all sorts of canoeing, and there are canoe club friends here that I've shared that with. I've just come back from whitewater canoeing in Mexico. Just exciting stuff. Been around the world with these old canoeing friends doing big whitewater around the world. But there's also been sea kayaking, canoe polo. There's a whole range of different canoeing things, and I love them all. And they're just part of the enjoyment of canoeing that I'd recommend to all of you. Canoeing is a wonderful sport.
And in fact, Richard has actually invited me to do the Hawkesbury Classic next year. So, yeah, just watch this space. I'll do it if I'm in the same canoe with you, Richard. And I have been canoeing.
We have started. We started at Lane Cove.
Yes.
We did a lap.
We
and
did.
Chrissie came out with gold stars.
It was 6 o'clock, it was dark and it was raining, and I thought, no, I'm a sunny day, definitely a sunny day paddler. Anyway, Richard was very patient, so yes, he set me this challenge for the Hawkesbury Classic. So with some of my kayaking friends that are in the audience tonight, maybe we'll have a bit of a look and see whether that's a possibility. It would be great to do
Probability, not
it.
possibility.
And then some of your other kayaking feats. We've got Bass Strait here on the screen behind us. So around Tasmania, you've done a little bit of sort of epic kayaking, as I might call it.
So I had long service leave. What do you do with long service leave other than just grab a boat and paddle for a few days around Tasmania? Seemed like a good idea. And it was. Phil, I think it's in the audience, the person I went with. It was just a 53 days of pure enjoyment. Again, we were incredibly lucky that it was calm weather and every day we were able to paddle. Got to see those amazing cliffy, rough coastlines and stop every night and camp along the way. That's the difference actually between what I did on Blue Moon and all the sea kayaking that I'd done before. You stop, you land, you have a nice place to camp at night, and if it's too rough, you can just wait out the next storm. Out in the ocean, on the Tasman, there isn't that option. It's go and keep going, whatever the weather.
Yeah, we didn't look very calm in that photo, did it? Anyway, look, here is Blue Moon. You've mentioned Blue Moon. Blue Moon is the name of your craft in which you have achieved this incredible feat. So tell me a little bit about Blue Moon. First of all, where did the name come from? It's a song, isn't it? Some of us know that song.
I don't.
I won't sing it, I promise.
But it came from my aunt. I put something out on my Facebook site very early on for suggestions. She suggested once in a blue moon. That sounded good to me.
Yeah,
so
I like
that's what it became.
So this is Blue Moon, and so this is not your regular kayak that you buy in the annual sale at Anaconda, is it? This is something quite different from that. And Richard is a mechanical engineer by trade.
Structural engineer.
Structural engineer.
There's a rumour going round that I'm mechanical. I'm definitely
I definitely
not.
saw it written somewhere, and it wasn't on Australian Geographic. So tell us a little bit about this kayak that have you modified an existing kayak? Did you build it from scratch? Looks like you built it from scratch.
So I did start with a double sea kayak, a classic Mirage double sea kayak, and that was what I used to make the hull. It's just a stretched sea kayak. So the original, the Mirage double, 7.5 metres long, I stretched it to 10 metres long. I also widened it from about 700 millimetres to 850 millimetres. That was to give enough space, to give enough volume so that I could fit all the equipment that I needed. I also had this idea that I'd never seen in any other ocean kayaking boats, that I wanted to be able to have a bedroom that stayed dry. So Tom talked about the water that gushed into his cabin. That is a dilemma that all other ocean kayakers have had. You go straight from a cockpit where you're wet to a cabin where you're dry, hopefully. But the hope I wanted to be a bit more certain about. So I came up with this idea of having an intermediate vestibule between cockpit wet and bedroom dry, where I could get out of wet clothes, where I could do wetter things like cooking and try and make sure the bedroom stayed completely dry. So that meant that the boat ended up being a bit longer to be able to have that luxury space. But it did also mean that my bedroom stayed dry the whole time I was out on the ocean. A real bonus.
Yeah, we're looking at the illustration of the boat there. That bedroom looks like there's not a lot of wriggle room in there if you were to suddenly wake up and sit up in the middle of the night. Did you bang your head very often in that room?
So it had been designed, I'd sat on the ground and done this to my head and said that's how high I needed it to be, and so that's how high it was. I could sit up in both the vestibule and the bedroom, and so a real luxury. A bit of windage to go with that, but certainly made it a lot more comfortable inside.
And, tell us a little bit more about the preparation in terms of fitting out the boat and the kind of sort of the safety elements, but also we're always fascinated about the food, aren't we? What did you eat and how did you sort of prepare for what you're going to eat for 60, well, you would have probably prepared for longer than 67 days.
So I did aim for 100 days of food to take that, with the aim that it'd be about 70 days of paddling. So I had 100 days. I love Weet-Bix, and so Weet-Bix was a staple out there. Weet-Bix and powdered milk every morning. I also love Coca-Cola, and so I took a bottle of Coca-Cola for every day. So I had 100 bottles of Coca-Cola, supplied in fact by my lovely neighbour. She got the Coca-Cola supplies and they went the whole way across the ocean with me. Lunchtimes was mostly Vita-Weets, fairly bland again, with mostly fish or salmon or other tins of things, plus peanut butter and Vegemite. Dinner time was a dehydrated meal that's made in Tasmania, plus dessert. There always had to be dessert, plus soup, so 3-course meal. There was time at night. Like Tom said, there's time at night out in the ocean. There isn't someone with a gong saying you must do this now or whatever. There's time to eat and enjoy and relax at night time. So I did. So meals were
It
long
looks
affairs.
delicious, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
I actually
Yes,
I really
does.
love that corned beef in that tin.
Who in the audience has had corned beef or spam? The wonderful spam.
Tell us, look, we're looking at those Coke bottles. Now, they also doubled as water bottles. Tell us about how you desalinate, about the water, or how you managed your water supply.
So it's interesting hearing Tom. 250 litres of water would have taken up my whole bedroom. So there's no way I could have fitted that much water. I relied on having about 30 litres of water, plus then the 100 by 300 millilitres of Coke bottles as my liquid supply, then a hand desalinator. And so I was regimented into making fresh water with my desalinator every second day. Like Tom, I was going through possibly 1.5 litres of water a day for cooking and drinking, so I had to make that much water. As a backup, as I drank through my Coca-Cola bottles, I replaced the liquid that had been in them with desalinated water. So I always had that backup of Coke or liquid water.
And you were recycling your plastic bottles as well.
Oh, indeed. So rubbish, the things that had rust away, the tins and that sort of thing, they went over the side, and all the plastic stayed with me.
Yeah, so, I mean, in terms of training and your physical training, how did you get into shape to do this? Or was it just the amount of kayaking that I know you do all the time? Is that the training for something like this?
So I always thought that day one would be training for day two, which would be training for day three. It's a pretty good way of doing it. I'm not much of a one for training, just as training. I enjoy going with other people, enjoying whatever version. So not direct training. I do a lot of canoeing, so that was the starting point. And I'd always thought that it wouldn't be the physical. It was always going to be the mental that was going to be the weak point. And how to train mentally for something like that. There isn't a textbook on it that I've seen, and so it was always going to be a bit into the unknown of just what it would be like to be alone and to have to make the decisions that could be life-threatening. And
now, it wasn't the first attempt to go across the Tasman. So let's have a look at the first attempt that happened in November 21. So tell us a little bit about that first attempt, and because the second time you went, you left from much further south and you took a very different trajectory. So tell us about the choice of the first trajectory there.
So first try was back in good old COVID days when no one liked you doing anything, and New Zealand had a rule that anyone that arrived would be blocked from coming in. So that was going to be a bit tricky. I didn't want to do a Tom type thing and land and be sent away. So we came up with an idea of this COVID paddle halfway there and back again. And I kind of went with that with my first paddle. I had a land support who are in the audience today, and they suggested, quite rightly, why don't you go up the coast and then out to Lord Howe Island, and if something goes wrong along the way, well, then you've got safety close at hand. And so that's what I did. I had this wonderful cruise from Sydney up to Port Macquarie, then went out towards Lord Howe Island, and then did the reverse, coming back again, essentially. And that was Tasman 1, and essentially a big fail. I didn't get to New Zealand.
And so what happened then? You were still in the middle of COVID, so you went back to the drawing board and you thought about going by this different route. Tell me about the
I told the family it was all over. I told quite a few people, actually, my boss at work, that I wasn't going to do anything more. And then someone said, I'm thinking of doing something like what you've done. Would you give me your boat? I live in Hobart. Is there any way you could get it down there, sort of thing? I thought, wow, Hobart, it's a bit closer, Hobart, to New Zealand. Instead of Sydney to New Zealand, it's about 2,000 kilometres, 1,700 or something from Hobart to New Zealand. And it just got me starting again. All of a sudden I felt excited, truly excited. So that started the whole thing again.
And it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's been done before. So to what extent did some of those earlier journeys sort of factor into both your thoughts about how you would tackle it, but also did they inspire you as well?
So absolutely inspired by the 3 boats that had been before. So in that picture, the first person that's self-propelled across is the rower. So rowing, can I suggest, Tom, it's a bit easier? But I think that's borne out because Tom did 6,000 miles and I only did 1,000 miles or something. It's a much slower way of going in a canoe, and so the first big crossings tend to be rowing boats, and so the first person across the Tasman was a rower, and he did it in a time when there was no electronic tracking of people. No one knew where he was when he went. So that was pretty exciting for all those around him. And a learning from that was people want to know where you are. And so having some version of tracking is a good thing. It actually calms down nerves rather than increasing worry, I think. So having a tracking device was a big learning from that first rower. Andrew Macaulay was the first person to give it a red-hot shot. He got close. Tough going, though. He'd decided to take a boat that was pretty much stock standard kayak without any sort of cabin, and so he slept at night in a puddle of water in the bottom of the boat without room to move. It was essentially straitjacketed at night and then rowing or paddling in the day in very wet conditions. So I learnt from his experience, you need creature comforts. You need to be able to have that escape from the rough and tumble out there. James and Justin were the first to actually make it. They had a great cabin. They did loops out there, so I learnt you've got to be patient. You need to be able to weather the bad weather, the going backwards, floating at night time when you're not paddling, going backwards. So that was a big learning from them. They had an automatic desalinator, electric desalinator that didn't work. You can't get a thing that makes water wet, it seemed. So going with a manual desalinator was a learning from them. Heaps of other learnings. I did find from James and Justin, they were just an amazing, friendly source of information. So many things they told me about their trip, so I did learn many, many things from them. Scott Donaldson was the first solo person to do it. He stopped off at Lord Howe Island, got some gear dropped. So a big learning from him was make sure you take enough food so you're not running out of food and having to ration yourself along the way. He was a very regimented army style person, so I took from him, don't be so regimented. It is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a holiday. Make sure it is. Yes. So very inspirational, those 3 kayakers going across, but also many others. Michelle gave me an amazing amount of advice on what to do, how to cope with being out on the ocean alone. So thank you, Michelle.
Now, and of course, we all remember, many of us here knew Andrew Macaulay well, and we remember him with great fondness. And of course, Kaz and Jonesy are great mates of ours at Australian Geographic as well, and we look forward to catching up with them next time. So you're out on the water. This is your as you call it, Tasman 2 attempt, but 67 days is a long time to be alone at sea, but you weren't always alone, were you? You had plenty of wildlife for company. Actually, we just have a look at this map, because this is, I think, as the crow flies, is the black and white, the dotted line there, but the orange line is actually how far you went. So which one of those is the distance when we say 1,600?
So the dotted line is the 1,600.
Wow.
There's a few more kilometres in the wiggles and wobbles.
Right.
Yes.
Do we know how many more?
No, we don't. No. Maybe
A
2,000. I guess 2,000. Maybe it's an extravagant exaggeration.
Yeah, 2,000. I dare not get my facts wrong again, Richard. So...
But you can see the wiggles back in that photo of Tasman 1 going around in circles and then being towed back to shore.
Now,
And then Tasman 2. I had aimed to try and make it into Milford Sound. It sounded romantic to me, a pretty exciting place where all those beautiful scenery is there waiting, and I just didn't even get close. The wind took me where it wanted to take me, and I was way south early on, and it was just lucky that I got back up.
well, I mean, this looks a bit sporty, doesn't it? So these were some of the people, or the companions that you had along the way, some of the wildlife that sort of kept you company. And I think, we heard from Tom about the amazing biodiversity out there on the ocean. So tell us about some of your regular visitors that you had during the kayaking.
It was quite a contrast between Tasman 1 and Tasman 2. So Tasman 1 being further north, I was sharing airspace with thousands upon thousands of shearwaters. They were everywhere. They squawked all night. They were all around. And so that's what I expected further south, but it was very different. I saw one seal near Tasmania. I saw one seal near New Zealand. Well, that was it for seals. I saw this one whale with its partner, so a pair of whales. They were the only whales that I saw the whole way. I did have some sharks, like Tom, that shared time with me, spent about a week swimming around the boat, eyeing me off each morning. I had fun with them too, trying to feed them things, including my own hand. They weren't interested. But they were just great company, those sharks.
I think I have a bit of video of those sharks. Let's see what comes up next. There we go.
See, just eyeing me off. I'm sure it was to say hello. Yeah. Lovely things.
And what have we got here? Is this a shearwater?
Albatross.
Albatross.
So I
Can't see it
moved
much
from
over.
shearwaters up north to albatross were the main birds down south. Nowhere near as many of them, maybe 20 a day, something like that. But they were inquisitive, and so they'd come in, swoop round like that, really close, eye me off, and then sometimes land. And albatross are incredibly funny things when they land. They're so graceful, as you'd know, in the air. They're so effortless. And they can sail so effortlessly in the air. But when they try and land, they are anything but graceful. So they have big feet that they put out like landing gear, but then they forget that there's a momentum equation there. And so their feet hit, and then they just topple over like a nosedive. And they'd do that so close to my canoe that they'd end up with Blue Moon just rolling straight over them. But it was fun for me. It was antics out on the water and always exciting.
And some of the other creatures that you had to engage with were the barnacles on the boat. So tell us about removing barnacles.
Yeah. So barnacles grow incredibly quickly. They start as little tiny things, but they get to 30 or 40 millimetres in a week or two of growing. And so I did have barnacles, and I did have to get out to scrape them off. So twice I got out along the way to scrape off barnacles. It was okay when I was on Tasman 1. It was nice and warm up there and swimming was fine. But down south from Hobart, it was always cold. And so jumping out was a real deal. And
So-
I tried to do as quick as I could.
And when you did you do the same, Tom? Did you scrape barnacles out? So do you then, are you untethered from the kayak when you do that?
So my family in particular and my land supporter were glad to know that I didn't untether almost the whole time. When I was out of in the cockpit or in the ocean, I was tethered almost always. The one exception was that I really wanted to get a photo of the whole boat. I should have had a drone to do it probably, but I didn't have a drone. And so the one way I could get a picture of the whole boat was to swim away from the boat. And so I untethered to swim away from the boat on a beautifully flat, calm day and got the shot.
And so after 65 days at sea, what was your first human contact? We can see a boat in the photograph. So what happened then when you finally sort of saw a boat? This is maybe 2 days before you saw land?
So I had seen, like it says in the other photo, I'd seen land from day 60, 7 days before I actually got to Riverton. And it was a pretty exciting moment. I hadn't seen land, a bit like Tom again. It's a pretty exciting moment to actually see land. And for me, it was this thought that it might actually be possible to do it. It was now a true possibility rather than just the dream still going on each day. And so it was overlain then by thinking, well, Andrew Macaulay got that close. What happened to Andrew when he got that close? But then a few days went by, land disappeared, land came back, land disappeared, came back again, and then this boat appeared out of nowhere. And I thought I was going to be chatting to some fisherman that knew nothing about me, like most of the rest of the world. But he knew all about me. He told me where I'd come from. He told me what I was doing out there. He knew. So the lovely crew that was waiting for me in Riverton had primed up even the fishermen out on the ocean, and this person was just so excited to see me.
And what was that like, that feeling of seeing land? I mean, did you know exactly where you were? Did you know what you were going to do? Were you going to track south or track north? What was your reaction?
So I was close to the southern tip of Stewart Island, so about as far south land that I could see of kind of mainland New Zealand. And so I was hoping that I'd be able to go further north. I had a wonderful weatherman, and he'd told me that southerly winds were coming, so I was pretty confident that I'd get blown north. And so seeing that land down south, it was just a case of hang in there for another 7 days, as it turned out, to get blown further north and be able to land.
Now we're looking at some of these blisters. We've seen Tom's. Now we're seeing yours, Michelle, as well. Yes, some of the I suppose the mix of salt water and cold wind and human skin.
It was probably the most shocking thing I saw from Michelle, that picture. And how on earth did Michelle keep rowing with hands like that? I was determined that mine weren't going to look like that no matter what. 'Cause that's perseverance, to be able to row when you've got hands that rough.
And is that from, because yours look pretty good there.
Mine stayed fantastic.
Yeah.
That one little tiny blister that went away, and that was it for the whole way. I did wear gloves, and so they're a saving grace. They do make your hands go very pruny after 10 hours, but it works.
And anyway, here we see your welcome party at Riverton. So have you got some people in the room tonight who were there to welcome you?
I did. So my dad here and his friend Janet, so that's Eric and
where's
Janet.
Dad? You can give us a wave, Dad.
And also Annette is here. So Annette was my logistics lady. She'd sorted out everything in the background. She'd arranged a lot of the gear that I took on board. My PLB was her organising. The whole first aid kit was her organising. That was all part of what she did. My first land support group are here too. They were instrumental in Tasman 1. So John Bowe and Chris Stanley. Thank you to all of you. My sister's here. She wasn't in New Zealand, but she was certainly there all the way.
And was your sister the last person that you saw as you left Tasmania?
She was.
Yes.
Standing on the beach.
You're standing on that lonely beach, waving him off. It must have been a very tough moment for the whole family when you left and disappeared into the distance. It's very important to have that supportive family.
Great family. They've had to put up with all the sawdust and the fiberglass dust and the taking over the garage and all that sort of thing that went on for years of preparation. Helping with packing up all the food, 100 days of food into vacuum sealed bags, all of that. That was family and a lot of other friends helping out.
And here you are arriving, and were you able to walk as well when you got off onto that jetty? What happened?
So Dad fortunately had a walking stick, and I did commandeer the walking stick. It was certainly, legs didn't work. I think they'd lost memory of how to walk rather than actual muscle loss. So I had the desalinator that I was using my legs for. So they got a bit of exercise out there. The muscles were okay. It's just how to keep balance and how to do things. One of the early things I did when I landed was have a shower, and it was just lucky that the person's place I was in had a chair in the shower, because there is no way I could have stood up while I was having that shower.
And you also had to present your passport, which you managed to keep dry for 67 days.
It went in a vacuum sealed bag as well, and it did make it over the web.
You did.
They were very accommodating, those official-looking people. They waited until I'd said hi to everyone and had a hug and things, and then they came over, and they really didn't do much. They'd come across from Christchurch, and so it was a nice day out for them. And they asked to see the passport, and then they didn't check anything else really. So very accommodating.
And tell us what you ate at this first dinner on terra firma.
It is steak, so I'd missed a steak.
You deserved a steak, for sure.
I'd been hoping for a milkshake when I first arrived, and I'd left hints with many people that I really wanted a milkshake. There wasn't one.
Now, tell us about what happened with Blue Moon after that.
So Blue Moon has now made it to Hobart, to the Tasmanian Maritime Museum. That's its resting place. It took 3 ships, a whole lot of logistics organising by Annette, and about a month of cruising around to get the boat into a container and round the southern Pacific to get it back to Burnie, to then get it to Hobart. But it's there now.
And can we go and see it? Is it on display yet?
Not
They're
yet.
taking the barnacles off it?
So it's getting there. It's in their storage at the moment.
Oh, well, we look forward. When we find out when it's on display, we'll let our readers know. And next time you're down there, you can pop in and have a look for yourself and just see how small those inner compartments are.
They have been taking it on some tours around and about and letting kids climb in and out. And kids love crawling into the vestibule and then crawling into the cabin and crawling back out again. I did keep a record of all the people that had a go at crawling into the cabin. There was only about 50 people that did it, and the number of people that got stuck getting in or getting through or physically couldn't fit through the door or into the seat, it's quite amusing.
Now, you mentioned the young people, and young people are a big part of your life. And in fact, when I first saw you speak, you were addressing the local scouts in the scout hut at the end of my road in Turramurra, and that's where I first met you. So what do you hope that people, and young people in particular, might sort of take away from your achievement? Because I know you've been so active in sharing your stories, particularly with the Scouts, which is, you know, a wonderful movement, and where I think your taste for adventure really started.
So I do enjoy sharing the story, but it's not only to young, it's to any age. Any age we can enjoy adventure, and that's the big message I'd like to get out there. Whatever your situation, whatever dream you might have, just follow it. A good friend asked me, why don't people follow their dreams? Why don't we do more adventure? And she suggested we should just look inside ourselves to see what stumbling blocks there are to saying yes, to taking that dream and making it reality. And that's really what I'd like to come out of this, to say to everyone, whatever you dream, it doesn't have to be an ocean. It can be just walking down the street if that's your quadriplegic goal. Just do it though, and you'll be much happier that you've done it. I'd recommend canoeing. I think there's many positives to canoeing that make it a good choice. But it doesn't need to be canoeing. It could be rowing.
Well, look, I think on that note, we might just bring it to a close. And I just want to say again, Richard, you're a great inspiration. And I think that message that you don't have to do a huge, epic adventure to find your own adventure. For me, I just think the first time you do something that you haven't done before, you go down a path that you've never walked down, or you get a little bit out of your comfort zone, you're already having your own adventure. And at Australian Geographic, we've been encouraging people, and the way that we encourage people to do that is by telling them the stories of people like Tom and Richard, so that they are inspired. Tom and Richard are ordinary people, and but they've done extraordinary things. And I think that, you know, that's the lesson. I mean, when we meet all of our adventurers, and we've got some of them here, they are just like you and me, but they have achieved extraordinary things. And it is finding that spark and that ability to overcome whatever it is that's holding you back and going and doing it, and just finding your own adventure.
Chrissie's just talking about why she's going to do the Hawkesbury Classic this year.
Look, it is probably just worth asking Richard what he's going to do next. He's always got some big adventure. So where to next, Richard?
There has to be a what next. And this was the answer. The Tasman was the answer to the what next a year or 2 or 10 ago. But there has to be a what next. And I do have a dream slightly formulating that I'd like to paddle around Australia. That's maybe a year's worth of enjoyment, relaxation out there. So one day I'll get my boss to give me a year's leave and prime my family to let me go away for another year.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about your circumnavigation of Australia. Please thank Richard Barnes. Now, we've got time for maybe about 3 or 4 questions. So does anyone want to kick off the questions? Okay. We're just going to wait for the microphone.
Hi, Richard. So when you were out there, were you having communication with people, like on land?
So I had this amazing satellite receiver thing that did all its business, and I could get a story out and a story in by email. And so I had a wonderful person putting a lot of stuff out on a website, Facebook page. I didn't use it on Tasman 2 beyond that, and so there was no direct voice contact with anyone. I had voice contact on the first one, but it was definitely more peaceful to just go without.
And so if you have voice contact, are you still then considered unsupported?
It's a fascinating thing, isn't it? We set our own rules, and so voice contact, I'd kind of decided I'd like to try without, but I wasn't going to be fussed if I did have to talk on the phone. Fortunately, I didn't have to, though.
Are you going to build another boat, or will you borrow one?
Are you offering your garage, Margaret, for my next building expedition?
One of the family were going to loan these.
Can I take you with me, maybe?
Oh, yes. Old lady blind lady.
Margaret's our lovely 90-ish neighbour.
Richard, congratulations on your achievement. I just wondered, the stars at night, what were the night skies like? I mean, the sunsets must have been amazing, but what were the night skies like?
So all of that is just such a bonus to being out there, to be able to look around. And I guess it's on the super calm nights that it really is special, because there was more chance when it was calm to be out, sitting on the deck and enjoying it. And so the stars are just like what people talk about, just being so many and so bright and so inspiring, just like the sunsets and the sunrises were truly inspiring. A real bonus, and so one of the delights of being out there.
Richard, after hearing Tom's great adventures, I know it's around Australia, sounds pretty good, but are you going to start thinking about the tropical Pacific maybe?
So, in our trip that I've just done to Mexico, I stopped off on the way to meet up with Cyril Demerio. I suspect he's probably the most outstanding canoeist alive at the moment. He's just canoed from America to Hawaii. So it's about the limit of what anyone has done in a canoe. It was pretty inspirational seeing him. He has great plans to extend his paddling, and so who knows whether I get the chance to follow in his footsteps.
Okay, I think we can have one more question if we've got one. We've got one more up at the back.
I understand you had one capsized. Could you like to tell us about it?
2 capsized, actually. One while I was sleeping at night time, and so I was just lying in the bedroom and a rogue wave must have come along, tipped the boat over. Quite a lot of the little stuff I didn't have particularly anchored down, and so it got sprayed everywhere. The boat's totally self-righting, and so it did its thing and self-righted, and I put all the stuff away and went back to sleep. That was capsize 1. The other capsize happened while I was out paddling, and it wasn't a particularly rough day. It must have just been that coinciding of too big a wave, something like that. And really, I guess I was just daydreaming, and I got thrown out of the boat as it tipped upside down, and so I was tethered on, the boat righted, and I got back in and paddled on. So I was pretty lucky, I guess, that it wasn't rougher and that the boat wasn't capsizing more often.
Okay, well, I think that's that. We're going to ask Tom to come back up here on the stage, and could you please give both of our incredible adventurers a huge round of applause. Now, we've got a little gift for both of you, which we'll now just bring up to the stage. There's no end to the gifts. Here we go. These are the kind that you can drink.
Thank you.
Thank you both. They've both given up their time to be here tonight, so please thank them.
And thank you, audience, all, for being so enthusiastic, being here tonight. When I came in, it was pretty windy and wild out there, and I was thinking, that's kind of like what it's like out on the ocean. But you all made it, and so it's lovely to have a packed audience.
Now, we've got a little bit of time, I think, that we can go to the bar. I think it's closing in about 20 minutes or something like that. So you will be able to meet our intrepid adventurers out there in the bar, and also Lisa Blair. You can speak to Lisa even if you're not giving her support. Go up and say hello to her, and Michelle and Michael, and mix and mingle with each other. And look, we really would like to do more of these events going forward now that we've got the pandemic out of the way. And what we'd really like to be able to do is to talk to you about the events and let you know they're coming along. And in order to do that, we need you to sign up, because we can't just contact you with all the rules and regulations about that. So if you could please sign up to Australian Geographic, and that way you'll find out about these kinds of events. But also it's a great organisation to support, because we in turn support people like Tom and Richard to achieve their dreams. So you can scan this QR code, or you can just go to australiangeographic.com.au and do it that way. So please do that so that we can let you know the next time we're going to have one of these events, and we hope to have them fairly regularly. And we've got 2 more coming up that I mentioned, in Melbourne on the 28th and in Launceston on the 22nd. We'll let you know all about those if you sign up for our newsletter. So once again, I'd really like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's been a really great night of adventure. And I hope that some of you are inspired to go out there and take up whatever rowing instrument you would like to, and join this kind of lifestyle, which is so rewarding, and as many of us here in the room can attest, and it's a wonderful way to engage with nature, because you're human powered. There's no engines, there's no noise. It's just you and the water and the surroundings and the environment. So it's a beautiful way to experience nature. So thank you both once again. It's been so wonderful to have you, and so wonderful to have all of you here, and we'll catch up in a few minutes out there. Thank you very much.